In a moment, I'm going to ask all of you to turn to the person next to you and say the word hello. You don't have to say your name, no need to introduce yourself, just say the word hello. Please, go ahead. Okay, you guys are awake. Now, I'd like for you all to do it again, but this time, instead of saying the word hello, I'd like you to say the word greetings. Go ahead. Thank you for indulging me. Now, if you had a little bit more fun the second time, the reason I'm here today is to perhaps tell you why. And no, it doesn't have to do with the fact that greetings is just a funny word that nobody really says anymore, though that could be part of it. But I think that there may be more. Today I'm going to tell you what that is, but first I'm going to tell you a story. When I was a freshman here at UT, I was enrolled in a very interesting math class. At the end of the semester, we were given an assignment to create a new idea about something we were passionate about. The assignment only had 2 rules. The first rule was that the idea had to be derived using a mathematical concept: addition, subtraction, multiplication, anything like that. The second rule was that the idea itself, the topic, had to be completely unrelated to math, as long as we were passionate about it. So as I was brainstorming, the topic was a no-brainer to me. I've always been passionate about words, writing, language, anything really about the way that we communicate and the effect that it has. I was thinking, and as we're writing, words are really the only tool we have to convey the concepts in our minds. So we play around with this tool as much as we can until we get as close as possible to the idea we want to share. Here was my big question, my new idea. What if we gave ourselves another tool? A tool that's already present in the tool we use now, a tool that's smaller than the current tool, but if used wisely, could have an even larger and deeper impact, a tool that resonates not just logically, but physiologically as well. In other words, instead of analyzing words based on their definition or their context, can we analyze words in a meaningful way by simplifying them down to their base units? Letters. Can letter choice be an effective tool of its own? Let's find out. So to explore this idea, I crafted an experiment. I took the first stanza of Maya Angelou's famous poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and I created 2 different adaptations of it. In the first adaptation, I replaced as many words as I could with synonyms that had a high concentration of letters and letter combinations that produced the long E sound. For example, I replaced the word wind with the word breeze. In the second adaptation, I did the same thing, replaced as many words as I could with synonyms, but this time, the synonyms had a high concentration of letters and letter combinations that produced the long and short U sounds, so oo and In this example, I replaced the word wind with the word gust. As you guys can see, both of the poems are about the exact same thing. They tell the same story. They just use different words, and really words with different letter concentrations, to get that message across. So I printed these poems out, and I went to the park one day. I went up to 40 individuals, and I asked them to read each poem out loud, and then tell me which one they thought was happier. To give you guys a sense of what these adaptations looked like, I've reproduced them both here, but with a color code to show you guys what I've changed. The underlined words are the synonyms, the words that I've replaced that are as close as possible to the original meaning, and the letters in blue are the letters that produce the vowel sound that is being targeted in that adaptation. I'm going to read each of these poems out loud, and I invite all of you to read them out loud with me, or at least mouth along as I go. We'll start with this first poem with the E sounds. Ready? The free bird leaps on the rear of the breeze and sweeps downstream till the extreme edge of the creek and immerses his wings in the sunny beam and pleased to claim the atmosphere. You guys are awesome. Let's move on to the second adaptation, the one with the U sounds. Ready? The loose bird flew through the gust and cruises down the rivulet till he comes to the cusp and plunges his pinion in the orange sun rays and dares to occupy the view. Thank you, guys. Some of you may be on to me by now, but when I asked participants to tell me which one they thought was happier, 95% said that they thought the first poem with the E sounds was happier. Why is that? Why is it that two poems that tell the same story lead to an overwhelming majority thinking the first poem was happier? It's because of this. When pronounced, letters that produce the long E sound cause one's facial muscles to move in a way that simulates a smile. Even though it's not a real smile, such as one produced from genuine happiness, there are studies that reveal that the facial changes involved in smiling trigger brain activities associated with happiness. One study done in 1989 by psychologist Robert Zajonc shows that this has to do with a temperature change that takes place in the brain as a result of muscle movements. For example, when you smile, your facial muscles stretch and tighten. This causes certain veins to restrict the amount of blood flowing to the brain. A reduction in blood volume leads to a reduction in blood temperature, and as that cooler blood hits your brain temperature lowers as well, and this triggers a happy feeling. Now, if that's a little too sciencey for you, because it's a little too sciencey for me, all you have to know is this. There is a real physiological effect here. But I wasn't satisfied with just that. I wanted to know if this tool of letter choice only works with verbal communication. In other words, do you actually have to go through the physical pronunciation process to get this meaning out of letters, or does the effect still work? Have our brains built up an association over time and they still recognize the impact of these letters? So I went back to the park. I asked another 40 individuals to, this time, read the poem silently, but again, tell me which one they thought was happier. And I've got to say, people are a lot more willing to participate in your poetry experiment if you don't ask them to read anything out loud, as you guys probably feel. So it was easier this time around. But again, 72% of people said the first poem with the E sounds was happier. What this means is that letters do have meaning. Their frequency matters, and this concept works. So I got really excited. I went home and I started to do more research, and I realized this idea isn't actually new. It's called sound symbolism, and it's the idea that vocal sounds carry meaning in and of themselves. And in fact, letters have always meant more to us than we've realized. Some of you may have heard of the Buba and Kiki effect. This was an experiment done in 1929 by psychologist Wolfgang Kohler and adapted again in 2001. The experiment goes like this. Participants are shown two shapes, such as the ones reproduced here, and they're asked, which one do you think is named Kiki, and which one do you think is named Buba? What do you guys think? By show of hands, how many of you would name the one on the left Kiki? All of you guys. Well, you guys are not alone, because 95% of the original respondents named the shapes like this, with Kiki being the shape with harsher, sharper edges, and Buba being the shape with softer, rounder edges. Wikipedia describes this Buba-Kiki effect as a non-arbitrary mapping between speech sounds and visual shapes. And this idea with letter choice is similar. It's a non-arbitrary mapping between speech sounds, their corresponding facial expressions, and emotion. So the effect actually prevails beyond just these two vowel concentrations. In 2001, Richard Wisemans set out to prove the well-known theory in comedy that the letter K is the funniest letter in the English alphabet. The theory is that jokes that contain the most Ks in them usually get the most laughs. His experiment went like this. It was a simple joke formula. Two cows are sitting in a field. One cow says, moo. The other one says, hey, I was going to say that. It's a silly joke, but he reproduced it with a variety of different animals and a variety of different animal sounds. And he asked participants to rate these jokes based on how funny they were. So there were jokes of this format, jokes that didn't follow this format. But the joke of this format that had the highest rating for comedy was, in fact, the one with the most Ks in it. Two ducks are sitting in a pond. One duck says quack. The other one says, hey, I was going to say that. Some of this research may be silly, but overall, there is something here. There is a legitimacy to this idea about letter choice that is fundamental to the way that we communicate, and more so to why our communication has the effect that it does. In other words, the answer is yes. Letter choice can be an effective tool of its own. And this idea has a variety of different implications in a variety of different fields. For example, this could add a new level of depth to literary analysis. By simplifying the idea of analyzing words to analyzing mere letters, readers may be able to achieve a deeper understanding or a more acute sense of the tone a writer is trying to convey or is inadvertently conveying in his or her work. And writers can use this to their advantage as well. For example, if a writer were trying to describe somebody experiencing happiness, they may choose to use the word cheery rather than the word joyous, because when readers digest this word, they will not only have a conceptual understanding of the happiness, but a simultaneous physical relation to it. And beyond that, as a marketing major myself, the marketing and advertising implications of this tool get me very excited. Marketers and advertisers can use this to increase the power of their brands, slogans, and general messaging content. For example, if a company were trying to come up with their new TV commercial and they want it to be catchy, they may use this tool and use a bunch of words that have this E sound so that when their listeners get this jingle stuck in their heads, they're singing it as they walk down the street, it will have a subtle association with happiness and therefore an overall more positive connotation with the brand or product. In music is a perfect example of an industry where musicians are trying to get their listeners to feel something very specific and convey something in a certain way. If this idea were implemented in songwriting, I think the effects could be marvelous. And lastly, it's just so cool. I think that there is something so beautiful about this idea of letter choice in that it gets closer and closer to establishing a universal way to portray, understand, and influence emotion in communication. It gives not just writers, but communicators, all of us, another tool that we can use to become more precise in our communication. In conclusion, it may or may not surprise you that I actually used this tool in preparing to give this speech today. I was very nervous before getting up here to come on stage, but instead of telling myself, calm down, you'll do fine, I told myself, breathe, be free, succeed. It sounds silly, but they were the first 3 words I could think of that had this high concentration of E sounds, and I repeated it to myself dozens and dozens of times. Did it work? All I can tell you is that it certainly got me smiling, and I'm definitely feeling happy to be here today. Thank you.